Hi, and welcome to the Becoming Trauma-Informed podcast, where we help you understand how your past painful experiences are affecting your current reality and how you can shift those so you can create your desired future. I'm Dr. Lee, and both myself and our team at the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety are excited to support you on your journey. We talk about all the things on this podcast. No topic gets left uncovered. So, extending a content warning to you before we get started. If you notice yourself getting activated while listening, invitation to take care of yourself and to pause, skip ahead a bit, or just check out another episode. Let's dive in. Hey y'all, welcome to this week's episode. This one feels really special for me because I have my husband here with me, who's also named Lee. So we actually started calling him TLC at the Institute so that people don't get us confused because we work together at the Institute now. I'm really honored to have you here with me, babe, because a lot of people don't know your story. Actually, barely anybody knows your story. And I think it's such a cool story. And there's so much beauty and so many lessons in it. And like just having watched you live your story and getting to be part of your story has really impacted me in the way that I show up in my work as the CEO and founder of the Institute. It's impacted me in how I treat other individuals who have mental health struggles. And so I am just stoked to have you here to talk through what you've been through so that other humans and in particular other men can hear this because it's really important.
Thank you, baby. I really appreciate that introduction there.
I want to kind of take people back because I think that if people meet you in person, you are like a really chill, happy-go-lucky, funny, sarcastic, like witty, very intelligent guy.
Thank you. I'll agree with that.
And I think a lot of people don't know about the struggles that you've gone through. I know where your story starts because we've been together for almost 18 years, so I know you just a little bit by now. Our relationship's almost an adult. And I know that the struggles on your journey link back to some of your middle school days. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah. No, really. I mean, even kind of before that, I mean, in some ways, even in elementary school, it's one of those, it was like kind of being bullied growing up. Wasn't really until 7th, maybe 8th grade. I kind of started fitting in a little bit more, and that was mostly due to sports. In a lot of ways, it was kind of one of those ways, but it was, there was a lot of, and I know it's some, stuff a lot of people go through. I mean, it wasn't nothing like, not going to sit here and pretend, extreme or, not a lot of violence and stuff, more just, really not fitting in a lot of places. Fitting in with people who were outside of my school, like friends of the family, or even, I did Boy Scouts and stuff, that kind of thing. But like in school, it was not the greatest time, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I don't get to coach you often. He doesn't let me coach him, y'all, most of the time, which is good. I get to play wife role with him most of the time. I just want to even reframe what you just said there because you were like, well, it wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
When we look at adverse childhood event scores, and meaning like when we measure different types of traumas in kids, we've actually added bullying as one of the things that can earn you a point. And the more points that you have on the ACE scale, or the more adverse childhood experiences you've had, the more likely you are to have like a variety of numerous negative health, both physical and mental consequences. I think a lot of times we think like, oh, I got picked on in school. It's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It is a really big deal to not feel like you fit in a place that you're spending like 30 hours a week.
Yeah, no, and honestly, I really appreciate you saying that too, because realistically, that's one of those things I know, but this is not something that I've shared really with very many people less than a handful of people in general. So it's one of those I noticed like that right there, just kind of some automatic defenses, kind of.
Yeah.
No, it's
It's not that
okay,
bad.
it's
It's not that
okay.
bad. Like,
No,
yeah, we
it's not a
actually
big deal.
learn to invalidate ourselves because there's some vulnerability
Yeah.
in being like, wow, that really affected me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate you catching me on that one there, because yeah, it is one of those. Yeah, I know when people do that, they tend to dump. No, yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I need to
and
do that.
I think that you're making this very evident for the audience too. Like, and I meant to say this at the beginning, you know, I've always like really respected your privacy and your desire to like keep a lot of this close to your chest and not really have these conversations with a lot of people, because a lot of what you have been through, you know, people would shame or people would say like, oh my gosh, like you've been through that. I am just really grateful that you agreed to come on here and talk about this, because I didn't force him, y'all, I swear.
No, absolutely.
I didn't even bribe you.
No, in all honesty, I mean, I think it's important too, though. I mean, it is something that for a long time too, not maybe on some level realizing, like, because I would really compartmentalize who I was
Mm-hmm.
towards who I was meeting.
Yeah.
You know, in a lot of ways, it felt really normal. And maybe in some ways, you know, people generally may pick up traits, if you will, like of different friends and stuff like that. But I mean, I would almost be
A chameleon.
different people depending on who I thought people wanted me to be.
Yeah. And that came from the bullying experience, you feel like?
Yeah, in general, yeah, I feel like I felt like I wanted to fit in a lot of ways so bad, so that anything that didn't necessarily fit with the image, you know, that I would kind of make for myself, or maybe myself based on who I was with or anything like that, would kind of change, because I'm like, oh, you know, I want them to be, you know, my friend. I want them to, want to spend time with me and get invited to things. Yeah, you know, at school, I'm okay, really, you know, big into sports. Kind of took on, and I don't want to say a persona, but in some ways, you know, it's like when I
Kinda.
would hang out with other friends. Yeah, it kind of was. You know, I'd hang out with other friends. It was like the same weekend, hang out with friends who had like school, who were, you should call, say, preppy or whatever. But then it's like the next day, hang out with friends who I didn't go to school with, you know, who would be, I guess you consider goth people, like wearing, you know, all that, and people who were very expressive in who they were. And I was like, well, this is awesome. But it would kind of switch back and forth.
So what you're describing is, it reminds me a lot of like when we talk about neurodivergence and complex PTSD is like masking and like being a chameleon, because you learn, okay, the only way that I'm accepted is if I show up in a way that other people like. I'm like not even going to really learn who I am and what I like, because I'm going to spend so much time doing what other people like. Yeah, I can fit in anywhere, right? I can fit in with anybody. I still remember going to a couple parties with you when we were first dating, and you were like the life of the party. You were talking with people, you were like making really good friends, and I always thought it was so weird because we'd go to leave the party and you like wouldn't get their phone number or like wouldn't make plans to meet up with them again. And we'd leave and I'd be like, "Oh, you seemed like you really like that person." You're like, they were okay." And I'm like, "What?" You just convinced them that like you were new best friends, and you weren't doing it maliciously. Like it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like sociopath behavior, you know, there wasn't any motive behind it,
Yeah.
but you were just so good at, I don't know, at making people feel like they are liked.
Yeah. I think I wanted a lot of friends, but the idea of having close friends
Mm,
that really knew me in a lot of ways was always very scary.
yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. It's kind of funny because I went to my high school reunion or talked to other people I went to school with, and they're like, "Yeah, you were so popular. Like all the girls liked you, and all kinds of stuff like that." And I'm thinking, huh? Because in my head, I'm like, yes, people like me. Like I had a lot of people. Like if I walked down a hallway, I could be like, "Hey, how's it going?" You know, this and that. But it's like when it came to talking on the phone or just hanging out with people. Like I never had a sleepover at my house.
Mm-hmm.
Just never did. Like I would never have a party. Never threw a party. It was never like, but I wanted to be invited to things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to have friends, But I think the thought of having friends that really knew me, I always kind of still felt like they only knew part of me.
Yeah. And
So
that felt
even if they
scary.
did like me, yeah. And so the idea that they would know all of me. One thing too, speaking in the whole neurodivergence thing, I mean, I didn't know until after I'd graduated college, and I was in doing some post graduate work, post bachelor work, that I had gotten diagnosed with ADHD, and it was like, oh, yeah, it kind of explains, a few different things. So just kind of putting it out there, like where I'm kind of coming from, it is something I did during this time too, have undiagnosed ADHD that, I had to have the pressure put on, if you will. So when it came test time, I could do really well on tests or like on the ACT or when I had to write, something to get into college. Like, yeah, I could do that, but yeah.
Hmm. So how do you feel like this? Well, and to be fair, a lot of what you experienced like outside of school too, a lot of your social conditioning was like around keeping things copacetic, keeping things happy, keeping things good. And
Yes.
like that's just how you were raised. Like that's the environment you were born into.
100%. When we first started doing work on trauma, you started telling me about boundaries. My absolute first response was like, you don't have boundaries with people you love. Like boundaries
Mm,
are good. Why would you have boundaries? That sounds like a bad thing. Like it didn't sound, and I remember you talking about it. I'm like, well, that just seems like you're being mean. Like that seems like you're to your family and to like your close friends. Like, why would you have boundaries? Because yeah, it was growing up. Actually, I think at one of the family gatherings here recently, was just told like that's kind of our family way, Everything, kind of keep the water calm, keep it copacetic.
yeah.
It didn't seem weird to me growing up that we had people who had been like through an acrimonious divorce, right in the same room at every single holiday up the pike. I mean, Labor Day, Memorial Day, every little like
Yeah.
the thing here and there. Never was there a fight. And never was there a screaming match or somebody leaving or like that just never happened. And to me, that just seemed like completely normal.
Yeah. And it was wild too, because I remember looking at your family compared to mine and being like, oh my gosh, this family's so calm and everyone gets along so well and it's so easy. And then, I'm used to yelling and like everybody voicing their concerns very loudly and also I was not used to having that much family around at once. My family's spread out all over the US and beyond. And so watching you all interacting with each other like on a consistent basis and also like there's never fighting. And there's also always this palpable energy like underneath the surface. And I couldn't figure out why
Oh, yes.
I was always so tired at your family gatherings and why I need to take a nap. And I was like, oh, it's because there's so much energy that's like not getting dispersed. Like it's just sitting there. And I'm like, and as somebody who absorbs energy, if I'm not careful, I was like, why am I so tired? Why is this so hard? Anyway, so you got through high school, star football
Yeah.
player, like really became the golden boy. Like you were what everyone
Yeah.
else wanted you to be. And then went to
Yeah. Got into
college.
the good school, got
Yeah.
into it's like, oh, yeah, everybody, it's either football, like, oh, you won this award or that award, or it's you got into Ohio State. And it's funny, most people, like, and I would think from like your school, out of high school, it's like, oh yeah, everybody's going to all these, outrageous schools or whatever else. And it's like when I was growing up, there were about like two universities near us and then a community college. And that's probably where about 80% of my graduating class, which was only 70 kids, went. And then there was like people didn't go to big schools except Ohio State. There was I think three of us
Hmm.
that made it there. So it was like nobody in my family had ever gone to for a university on my immediate family. Had like cousins and uncles and stuff that have. And so I think that, yeah, that was one of those things. I remember growing up, it was which 4-year university do you want to go to? That was always the hope for, I mean, really the whole family.
Yeah. How do you feel like college impacted your mental health and like how you saw yourself in the world and how you developed?
I mean, in a lot of ways, it was good in terms of really being able to meet people. Part of the reason why I went to Ohio State, I want to get out of this small interior groups. You know what I mean? Be able to meet and know people because I think, and I think it was more of a subconscious thing. But I'm like, I want to meet more interesting people. I don't feel like and I know this sounds like I'm trying to be like big on myself, but like I'm not like a normal person, and a lot of the thoughts or ideas and stuff that I had, I couldn't express, and that's why when I got to college, and people started wanting to discuss philosophy and all sorts of things. There were all these different people with different ideas. It was like, in a lot of ways, good, but I mean, I will say my freshman year was quite rocky because I mean, it was so new and exciting. It made it a little bit hard to study and
Yeah.
get on track with
Well, at
things.
least your first quarter before you met me and I
I know, right?
helped get you organized.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, what you say makes so much sense around you could actually like start to be more of yourself with people. And like you could
Yeah.
be like, I'm into this. Are you into this? And I still feel like, though, you didn't show
No,
everybody your full self.
no. I think in a lot of ways I really liked that, but also I was so, if you will, conditioned or whatnot. But it was like, yeah, the idea that I could like say something that I enjoyed and have somebody else who was also like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And it not then follow you around or, you know, for years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you don't like those people, find a new group of
Right.
friends.
There's
There's
like
50,000
50,000. Yeah.
students.
50,000 students. I was just going to say that. Yeah. So we met our second quarters because Ohio State was still in quarters, our second quarter of college. And what's so interesting, like reflecting back now that we know this about you, because spoiler alert, you've been doing therapy and like
Hmm.
really learning all this stuff about yourself. I feel like I thought I knew you really well. And then it took, but like over the years, I was like, wow, there's all these, like, there's pieces and parts of him that like I did not know existed. And I don't know that we've ever actually had this conversation. Like, was that something where you like was that an intentional thing or was that more still kind of a subconscious thing of like I'm going to just slowly show her the parts?
No, it felt completely normal. I think in some ways I almost had in my brain that, like, there's probably lots of people that have these weird thoughts or
Mm,
ideas or this kind of thing, and that's fine. But of course, they don't share that with like company, like with people. Like, that's just not something that's talked about or shared. But it didn't seem like I didn't feel like there was like I was like, ooh, there's all this stuff that she doesn't know about. Like, I'm just not gonna tell her.
yeah.
It was more just I'm like, yeah, everybody has like secret thoughts or ideas or this kind of thing, or things that they might like, and it's like, but doesn't always need to be shared. I mean, that's just not. Maybe it does go back to don't rock the boat, if you will. Like.
Well, and it's so fascinating that you say that because like that's so different from how I ever thought. I was like, no, like you're not supposed to have secrets. Secrets are bad. Like you show everybody all the pieces and parts of you, which I honestly still live by that these days, but I do have more
I
privacy
do
around
more
some
so.
things.
My thought was always, if you got everybody who I've ever known, maybe into the same room, and you put all their knowledge together, that they can get like 95% of me.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's like, but even then, one person, I would never want one person to like know everything about me. And now saying that, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't sound maybe,
Yeah,
but it
because
seemed like that seemed perfectly rational. Like nobody needs to know all of me. Who could no?
well, it's we talk a lot about intimacy wounds at the Institute when you go through our trips programs or in the trauma informed partner course that you and I ran. We talk about intimacy wounds and like being vulnerable is a huge place that people get wounded around, which you obviously did when you were younger. And so like it probably felt not safe to show people your full self because like they could use that against you, especially like and I want to qualify too, not qualify. I guess that's not the word. I want to validate you a little more because all the things that you're like, yeah, I had all these weird ideas. Like, they're not that weird. Like, as you told me all of the ideas, I'm like, I still remember you telling me one thing that you thought was weird in college. And I was like, really? That's it? Okay. And
I do remember that. And I remember thinking like, oh man, she's going to think this is like really out there. I'm like, you're like, oh, that's okay. I'm like, wait, what? What? Hold on. You must not have heard me
is that
correctly.
why you kept me around?
All of it, like, no, but it's one of those that when I like, I don't know, I don't want to, I don't know, I could,
It was
like
just
showing you
surprising.
my thorns, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that you didn't like freak out and be like, whoa, this guy, he's out there.
Yeah, I'm out. See you later, dude. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
And in fact, I feel like you just love taboo out there stuff. It doesn't matter what it's in. Like, you have always loved learning about stuff that is outside of the norm.
Yeah, my favorite topic, drugs, religion,
Sex,
politics, like politics, the things that tend to make people feel emotion. To me, I'm like, those are the most interesting things. But yeah, I mean, like sometimes just the Salvador Dali or William Burroughs or Hunter S. Thompson kind of like level of like that kind of stuff just really interests me. That surreal kind of
surreal. Yes, Dali was a huge one that I remember. That was like the first of your favorite artists that I knew. Okay, so we met in college. You started kind of showing pieces and parts of yourself. And part of this journey that we haven't talked about that I do want to bring in here is like what you also learned about masculinity and what you also learned about what it meant to be a good guy, a good man, a good husband, a good father. Because as we get deeper into your story, like that definitely played a huge part. Like there was some definite trauma around that stuff.
For sure. That's definitely one of those things, it's like when you're growing up, you're told this is how a man has to be. It reminded me, I was just, as you were talking there was a scene in the show Breaking Bad, if anybody'd seen it, but where Gus Fring is down talking to Walter White, and he says, it's like, this is what a husband does, even if his family hates him, man provides for his family. And all this, and it was one of those, I don't know if anybody's seen it, they may remember the scene, but it's like, talking because Walter's talking about he's destroying his family, but he's like talking him into staying because it's like, even if they hate you, even if, they don't live with you or whatever, you are to provide for your family. And it's like, not to that level, but like, I don't know, kind of really reminded me of like, from that scene, it's like, yeah, that's what a man does, even if he hates his job. If it, boring, mind-numbing, like, oh, that's what you provide.
Yeah. Because you got your undergrad degree in history and psychology, and then like you didn't know I remember you didn't know what you wanted to do. You really didn't know what you wanted to do with your life. Like at that point, I think you still thought you wanted to be a professor, which is hilarious because I had no goals or aspirations for that. I ended up being the professor, but like,
yeah,
I remember that time in your life, you were just like, I just need to get a job. I just need to find something to provide. Like, that can help us as from a family perspective, because we got married a year after we graduated, a year and a half after we graduated college.
I don't think so. It wasn't that long, was it?
I feel like it was, because I know that I was in grad school, and so I think it was like a year and a half after we graduated undergrad, and you were working. You had done like some odd jobs. Like you were finding, like there were a couple things you tried out, right? I'm actually trying to remember the story or remember our life because I was so sleep deprived during that time. And we got pregnant with Ray.
The job market at that time was...
Oh, that's right. Because it was like 2008, 2009. And it was like right around that recession time. Yeah.
Yep, as the recession was happening. And so, because I graduated December. And I remember because the job market at that time was rough, and it was one of those, it's like nobody could find anybody hiring. And so I remember I interviewed like quite a bit. It was tough because I mean it was a few months at least.
Yeah, it was a few months. And then you got the job at Chase. which
you know.
I'll let you tell that whole bit.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember, like, I remember the application process and all that, and going in there, and I'm like, I was dressed nice, but like, I go in there with like a bunch of guys in like suits and stuff, and I'm like, ah, crap, this is like a real job kind of thing. I'm thinking, I don't know how qualified I am, but the interview went really well. And they offered me a job, and it was one of those, yeah, I had wanted, my thought was, and at this time I still had, is that it doesn't matter what job I do. A job is always just a job. You know, it's just a way to provide. You get vacations, you get nights, weekends, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, it's to work hard. And so, like, I'd wanted to be in a big company with the idea that I could, you know, work my way up through, and be able to advance, you know, and that was the idea, you know, it's like, it didn't matter what I was doing in my head. I just thought, hey, it's a big bank, it's a big corporation. I'd always loved to work, that sounds silly, but I want to work downtown in one of the big buildings, you know, because in my head, yeah, but that was the idea, though, that it was just, you know, that's how a man does things. You work and you move up, and it doesn't matter what you're doing, as long as you're doing it, as long as it's providing. And I will say, and when I first started there too, part of what was tough was I was really good at my job. And kind of just to give like a brief kind of summary, I worked with borrowers who had been having like trouble with payments and stuff, and
Homeowners, right? Mm-hmm.
homeowners exclusively, looking at like doing, I guess, in some ways like risk management or loss mitigation type,
Yeah.
you know, work, if you will. But it was mostly to be like trying to help these people, to try and look at their financial situation, see what ways in which the bank would be able to like kind of help them keep their house. And that, especially through the training and everything, I mean, everything sounded like really rosy. You know, it's like really helping these people. And I'm like, yes, I love this. I love being able to help people. I love being able to use like, you know, knowledge of being able to, in terms of math and finance and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to find a way that they can stay in their homes. I thought it's like a really noble cause wise. And at the beginning, especially, because it was right around the time that the financial crisis, because it
Yeah.
had
It was right
happened,
after.
but
Yeah.
jobs were right around the, but right around that same time too, when I was working there, they had bought out Washington Mutual, which was a West Coast bank. So a lot of people, but they had tons of, without going too much into it, like tons of toxic properties, and people had loans and stuff that were crazy. I mean, with interest rates that,
Yeah.
you know, make credit cards look nice, and it's like trying to work with some of these people. And then when I was like working, it was just people realizing, looking at their finances, and just like, there's no way you're keeping this house. And in some ways, it just started becoming way harder, because it's like wanting to do work and wanting to help these people, and just realizing like, I can't help you.
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's just business. I didn't make you lose your job. I didn't close the factory in your town. But I'm pretty much the one telling you, like, you need to look at selling your house.
Yeah.
You have about 2 months, and based on how much the bank wanted your house, which also made it a little bit tougher, is like, yeah, you don't have very long before
Well,
the
and
end.
I
So,
remember you would say like you felt like the Grim Reaper.
oh, absolutely. I would call people, and that's the thing. In a lot of ways, too, even when I would call, I was one trying to help them,
Mm-hmm.
but they've already multiple months behind.
Yeah.
I assume a lot of times bill collectors are calling. So a lot of times I'd call, and it's like, in some ways, I was the person they were wanting to talk to. I think until a lot of cases they realized, well, there's not really anything we can do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, and people crying, people just getting really upset, because I think it kind of hit the realization that you guys can't spend 70% of your income on your mortgage.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to work. And they may have known it, but when I'm telling them and they're crying and really upset, it's like I felt like I was a person calling to be like, I'm taking your house.
Yeah. I remember how much responsibility you took on yourself around that. And like again, reflecting back now, it's like you wanted a job where people liked you, like where you were able to serve and help them, and like you're actively ruining people's days and months.
Oh yeah, they would tell me that was the only thing I didn't do well at with that job, because I was good with talking, good with numbers, good with that kind of thing. But it's like when people were wanting to talk to me, and I wanted to like almost be there for
Yeah.
them. But it's like you only have, you know, so many minutes. Like, you need to keep getting, more calls, and it's like you spent 40 minutes with this person. And it's like, well, yeah, because I'm trying to get them
I
to
forgot about
understand.
that they were like, you're doing a fabulous job at this, and the only like, but you need to get your call times down. And I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I forgot.
I would get awards for other things, but that was always the comments like call times need to, get shorter or this or that. And it's like,
So trauma informed.
oh, I
We're
know.
gonna just give you
I
the
know. You need to
information and
cut
hang up
these
on
people
you.
off.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem. I'm like, some of these people were like, they wouldn't understand. But like, well, if we just reduce the payments down to like, half for this amount of time, and it's like,
That's interest
yeah,
only. Yeah.
what that some of these mortgages too, I would look at it and be like, dear God, walk away.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the value of your house is, not very great.
Yeah.
It's like, but as the bank, I had to be the one to tell them, no,
Keep paying.
keep paying your mortgage.
Yeah. So you couldn't even
I'm not going
like
to
do the
tell you
right
to
thing.
not pay your mortgage because, but I'm also like, I can't tell you, but in my brain, I'm screaming, get out.
Yeah.
Run. You have an 18% interest rate.
Yeah.
Run.
I remember you got a promotion, and so you started doing more of like the harder calls right around the time that we had Ray,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
our oldest kiddo. And
it may not seem huge now, but I had to drive through traffic there and back.
Oh, yeah, which you like, yeah.
Oh, buddy.
Well, I feel like everyone...
Extra 45 minutes or an hour in traffic every day.
And so you were really sleep deprived because I was working night shift. I got a night shift job, like, I think 3 months after Ray was born. And so there were 3 or 4 nights a week that you were home with the baby at night. And then I'd come home and sleep during the day. And then you would go to work in the evening. And then we flip-flopped back and forth. And it was just like, that was when things got really bad.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, it kept coming up against this whole, especially with having a kid and wanting to be able to provide for my family, wanting to be able to do this, but growing increasingly my brain, like, I can't keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I started becoming more and more depressed, even though in so many ways I had so much good going on. And I think that's really kind of helped, at least for me, really drive it, is I'm like, what the hell do I have to complain about? I have a beautiful wife. I have a beautiful baby. I have a house. I have a job in this economy where lots of people are like complaining about not being able to find work. I graduated. I'm like, what on earth do I have to be upset about? And just really, so hard on myself because it was one of those, like, I have to be able to keep this together.
Mm-hmm.
My family all had jobs that in some cases it was either physically or mentally demanding.
Your parents and like
I mean, my parents, my grandparents. I mean, I never knew anybody that had a job that they liked.
Yeah.
It was a job that they did. And everybody, like my dad, I remember had a job where physically it was like punishing for him. He's like, I got to support my family.
Yeah.
It's what a husband does. It's what a man does. He supports his family no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my head, I'm like, okay, I want to be the man that I want to be. I need to support my family no matter what. But also my brain is telling me, if you keep doing this, like, your brain is going to break. Like, you can't. So I felt like very much at a rock and a hard place and really just started making me feel more depressed.
Yeah.
To an extent. And that's the reason why I've really started getting help, is because I've never been suicidal per se, but especially at that time, like, that's where my brain started going.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I started doing things. I started really having serious thoughts of when I'm driving to work, I'm driving into the overpass. Like, well, it's an accident. Nobody's going to know. Like, everybody will just think, oh, I just slipped at the wheel. And I started having those thoughts. And at some point I realized, like, this is effed up. Because I started thinking, like, oh, the only reason I don't cut my wrists is because I can't, because I don't like knives, or because I don't like this. And those thoughts started becoming more normal until at one point I kind of had, I think you really helped me, in that, but I had the realization of, like, oh shit, this isn't normal. This isn't good. Like, I need to do something, because realistically I could see myself going, like, I'm going to do something that I can't come back from, that I was going to swerve off the road. And really it was Lee who was like, hey, quit. And I'm like, yeah, right. Like, I can't do that. And in a lot of ways, it was like, I think my first hospitalization, I was still at Chase.
Yeah. You got hospitalized while, you know what? I'm actually trying to remember because, to be clear, you've had 3 psychiatric hospitalizations, but 2 of them happened in rapid succession because you went
Oh,
in and then you
yeah.
left and
Jeez,
then you had to go back. And
talk about a little bit of trauma there. I think I completely blacked out the one of those times there.
yeah, I think they kind of all got
How about that?
mixed together because you were
Yeah.
working at Chase and you got hospitalized and then you got out and you went back to work and I was like, quit, like just quit, that you are not like,
Yeah.
this is not working. Because I remember you called me from your car and you were like, I can't go back in from lunch.
Yeah.
And I
I
was
wasn't
like,
even in my
dude.
car. That's the crazy part. I was walking around, they had a pond and thing. I was walking on the other side of the pond.
Mm-hmm.
Like at lunchtime, it was my
Yeah.
lunch break because no one's around, and I'm like, I can't walk back in there. I can't
Yeah.
stop crying. I can't stop freaking out.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that was, you know, I've shared my story around having panic attacks and having anxiety for pretty much my entire life. And as I had never seen that in you. And
Yeah.
so it was just this culmination of the job and the lack of sleep. And I remember you started even like you were having sleep deprivation, like hallucinations. I remember you were like seeing stuff off in the side
Yeah.
of your vision.
That really
And it
freaked me out.
freaked you the
Yeah.
hell out because you were like, oh my gosh, like, am I going crazy? Like, literally, am I going crazy?
Oh yeah, because it's one of those I've never had before where you ever see something, like out of the corner of your eye and you think, and you look and you're like, whoa, that was weird. Like, thought you saw something move. But my issue was, is I saw, like, I was looking at a piece of paper and I saw the letters and stuff moving.
Yeah.
And I closed my eyes and I was like, that was weird. And I opened them again. They were still moving.
Yeah.
I was like, oh
Because you
shit.
were so tired.
Oh, I was so.
And
Yeah.
And we just didn't know what we knew. We didn't know then what we know now. And so you went in to the hospital because you were like, I'm going to do something. And I remember you were there. You weren't there long. I remember that we brought Ray to be able to see you. So the first time you were hospitalized, you were at which facility?
OSU.
You were at OSU.
Harding.
That's right. I remember that. You were in OSU's psychiatric facility. And I remember we were able to bring Ray one time and you were able to come outside and just like give her a kiss really quick.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember you got out of there faster than I was expecting. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, in part because I think once I got in there and I started seeing all the other patients, I was like, oh shit, okay. I might have problems. And I don't mean this to sound like I'm being, mean to people who are obviously suffering, serious illness.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't belong in this place.
Yeah.
Like, I hadn't even attempted suicide in like a real way.
Yeah.
And other people there were there with like big wrist bandages, or they were there because they overdosed on whatever. And there's people with, serious schizophrenia or, serious other like disorders.
Yeah.
That I was like, okay, these people are way not functioning. And I'm like, okay, I'm way more normal, I think, and I say normal, but I mean, I'm way healthier than these people.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that I didn't get along with them, actually. I mean, it was really good. It sounds weird, but like talking to people, and I'm like, it did in some ways, at least in the short term, make me feel more normal, but also being there made me feel like, God, there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in an effing mental hospital. Wow, like, this isn't okay. This isn't where I need to be.
There was like shame.
There was a lot of shame. I'm like, I had thoughts of like, I don't know, every girl interrupted or all these other, because really, and I will say too, just as a slight aside, the way mental health is portrayed in the media, especially in movies, you don't see mental facilities as they actually are.
Yeah.
You either see old school ones where it's like horror movies, or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's complete, like Bedlam or something. It's not, it's actually a way safer. And in some ways, like you realize when you're there, it's like, even if you don't want to be safe, like you're pretty safe.
Yeah.
Like at OSU is one thing I will say, but it's like, it does kind of bother me though when I hear people talk about asylums though, because yeah, the level of shame and stuff like that I felt, I didn't want anybody to know. Like, no friends, no family, like,
Yeah.
don't tell
We
people.
weren't allowed. I think our parents knew and my sister knew, and that was it. I don't think your brother knew for a while. I don't think any of your like other relatives did. I remember I mean, you're my husband. Obviously, I was going to honor that. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember also it was kind of hard. I remember having to go to work and be like, "Hey, I can't work for a couple of days." And they're like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "My husband's hospitalized." They're like, "Oh my God, is he okay?" And I'm like, "Kind of." I
Yeah.
don't really know how to like. I didn't even really
Oh
feel.
yeah, the stigma around
Yeah,
that.
I didn't feel safe. Like, but people were fine thinking that you were physically injured. They were totally fine, but like
Absolutely.
thinking you were mentally unwell, people. I mean, it was a completely different response, and that's why I'm actually so glad that you're sharing your story on here because I know how hard this is for you. Because
100%.
people need to hear. They need to hear it's not like what you see on TV, and also I would love for you to share how you got out of there the first time and then why you ended up going back a second time because I don't want to say it's a
Yeah,
funny part
yeah.
of the story, but it is kind of a funny part of the story because you're
It's
too
not,
damn
but
smart for your own good.
yeah, I mean, I did have a degree in psychology, and also, I don't know, I've always been able to kind of read people, and maybe it's, but I kind of know what they want to hear,
Yeah.
you know?
I
And
mean, go
and
back
for the
to the
better or
sixth
worse,
grade
when I'm
bullying thing. Yeah, you know what people want to
right,
hear, so you tell them
you
what they
know
want to
what,
hear.
yeah, you know what they want to hear, and this and that, and I don't know, I mean, it sounds deceptive, and in some ways too, after I left the first time, I did kind of think about that, and like, dude, am I like one of those psychos? Am I, like, because I can convince people that I'm like fine and okay, and I'm like, but yeah, I just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm feeling so much better, and this and
Yeah.
that. But like, I wanted out of there. I decided I want to be out of here,
Yeah.
and so I just
And the only way to
figured a
get out
way.
was to like convince the psychiatrists and the doctors that you were feeling
Mm-hmm.
better, and which you did.
100%.
And I want to throw this in there because I was a nurse at the time, but I was still, I think 2 years into like the total of 10 years of school that I ended up going through.
Mm.
And the meds they put you on,
Oh yeah.
I, I mean, I guess I would just love to hear about your experience with that because those meds that they put you on, I know caused trauma for me because they made you
Mm-hmm.
so sleepy and so out of
Oh
it
yeah.
that it was scary to leave you home alone with Ray.
Yeah, and then that's part of what I didn't like, and growing up, it was one of those things too. It's like another one of those things. You don't take medicine. Like most of it, like my dad. I mean, I absolutely hates taking medicine. Everybody, it's like unless you're really dying, like no, you eat well,
Yeah.
stay in good shape. You don't take medicine, like,
Which I'm
unless
laughing
you
at because now
absolutely
your
need it.
family does take medicine, but like back
Now,
then they
now they
didn't.
do,
Yeah.
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 Oh, back no, 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 nobody did. And yeah, and when I would take those, like those meds, in some ways, my thought was, okay, like these will help, or these will just take a while, or this or that, or maybe I'll get used to it. But it was like I was out of it. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't feel bad, but like, and that was part of what was the issue is I didn't feel good either. I just felt really numbed out because
Yeah.
yeah, they didn't even know too at the time. I mean, they came up with different diagnoses from
Oh,
like
yeah.
depression to like,
The first hospitalization,
oh
they
yeah,
were
the
like
first time I was there it was like,
major
wow.
depressive disorder with psychosis, and the second one was like major depressive disorder with OCD, and like, and
Yeah,
and
bipolar,
bipolar. Yeah, they thought you were
OCD. What was
bipolar, and
some
they
of the
put
other?
you.
Yeah,
That's what the second
yeah,
hospitalization was. Now I'm remembering it because I feel like we blocked some of this out. They put you on a medication that like because they thought you were bipolar, and
yep,
it made you suicidal.
yeah. And actually, weirdly enough, I do think it's somewhat of a genetic thing with that medicine as well because yeah, as soon as I took that, I'm like, I went from being able to like, as I was out, and there was like a starter dose or what have you.
Yeah,
But after a few days, it was one of those. I was like, when I got out, I'm like, no, I can handle this.
yeah,
Like I'll be okay. Like I can get my shit together. I can plow through. And I started taking that. And I'm like, okay, I feel worse than I've ever felt, and I felt so depressed.
yeah. Well, but then like they kind of figured out your meds. And I remember you were telling the therapist what they wanted to hear. I remember so many times being like, your therapist will actually like talk to you if you talk to them about your problems. And you're like, no, because, and I remember the other issue was ADHD meds, because if you were too whatever, like they wouldn't prescribe you your ADHD meds, which were one of the things that really helped you, especially because the other meds made you tired. And so there was like all this stigma around that too.
Oh yeah, because those are drugs, and like even before I'm like, they're meds that you need, but like, if it's a heart medication or something like that, everybody's like, oh yeah, no, that's completely understandable. But since it is abusable or it is sellable or it is whatever, it's like, oh no, it's only so many days and so many this, and it's like you got to do it on these exact time frames and all that.
And you couldn't. They like drug tested you every time you went in. You couldn't use marijuana, which I was just like, oh my goodness, like really? Yeah. I'm not even going to go there in this episode, but like,
yeah, no, and there was something else too. I don't even remember but it was like, yeah. And you'd have to go there every like couple weeks or something.
Yeah. So
and it was like, yeah, I didn't want to get stamped with like bipolar or.
Yeah, I remember that. You were like, I don't want any of these diagnoses. So like, we're just gonna go with major depressive disorder, and I'm feeling better, and I'm not having any psychosis anymore. Also, one of the things that happened in both times you went into the hospital, like in that first round of hospitalizations, was you slept for the first time in like forever. So that was also a reason you felt so much better. And so like you were good so we made the decision you were going to stay home with Ray, and that was awesome. And it was so great. And they kind of got your meds figured out. And then we had the twins. And they were like 8 or 9 months old. I had just started my new job, and you were really sleep deprived. And the same thing happened again. Yeah. Except this time, it was a little more, well, I'll let you tell a story.
No, go ahead.
Well, no, this time, I remember we ended up in the ER because, like, you did end up cutting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I started getting, and that was kind of my wake-up call, is because I started realizing, like, and what's weird with me is it didn't seem irrational. It seemed perfectly rational in my head. Okay, I will feel better if I know that I have a way out, should I need to take it. So I'm like, okay. And I don't know, again, I have an issue with needles and stuff. You weren't thinking
clearly.
No, I was not. But for some reason, I thought, okay, like, let me cut my wrist a little bit here, make sure I could get to that point. And I'm like, okay. So if I can do that, then I could at least, this is my thought process, in my head, I would know that if I ever got too bad, that I would have an exit plan.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem irrational at all at the time. And looking back on it now, and even looking back on it shortly there afterwards, I was like, okay, yeah, that's not normal, rational thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and then they changed around your meds again, and you were in a different facility that time, and I remember you really did not like that facility.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't even as much per se the facility. It was also as much when I first went there that first night, and I will say I've actually talked to my therapist about this since. That first night I was there, I was in because they didn't have a bed in the normal area, if you will. I was in the high risk.
I don't think you told me this.
Yeah, that's why when I first was in there, I mean, the first guy that I met in there was talking more or less like kind of nonsense, but just more about how he had just gotten arrested because he was carrying a loaded AK-47. He was just going to go shoot some guy's house up because they made him mad, and he was just going to go. And he was like, and I'm like, that was the level of people in there, and I was legitimately scared because there'd be people screaming, people having like much more serious disturbance.
Yeah.
And a lot more like violent type people there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm like, again, I will say it was like, I wanted to get out of there.
Yeah. Well, and I do feel like at least that time we were better equipped. And I remember they put you on another med because they were like, oh, yep, there's a psychosis again. So like we must have psychotic features. And I'm still so frustrated that like nobody recognized that it was sleep deprivation.
Yeah, and I don't think even at the time I necessarily
I
realized
don't
it.
think any of us
But
did, but
also,
I was like, I'm not in the role of a nurse practitioner at this point, and you shouldn't have to
right.
try to realize it because you're the one who's psychotic from undersleeping. Like,
Yeah. Well, and my thing was too, and seems to look, but I thought there were questions. I still have questions, but I
yeah,
thought if I could find the answer to these questions of, why things are the way they are in the world, why do bad things happen to good people per se? Like if I could find an answer to these questions, it would fix the problem. Like I could understand the world better and I would be okay.
yeah,
And so some nights I would stay up really late too, trying to write. I would write like furiously, like 20, 30 pages, just trying to come to an understanding of questions of metaphysics or, what have you, of like, if I can just solve this problem, I'd be okay. And I would stay up until all hours of the night trying to solve problems that are not necessarily solvable.
yeah. And then you would take meds that made you tired.
Yeah.
And like the whole thing was just,
And plus, some of those meds too, my ADHD medicine, if I didn't take it until later in the day,
they
then I
kept you
would be
up.
up too. I mean, I
Yeah.
could not sleep if I wanted to.
Well, and I remember too, we both hated those meds because again, I never knew which husband I was going to get. I never knew if you'd slept or if you hadn't. I never knew if you were going to be like good, like, and I don't mean that I loved all versions of you that I got. And some versions were like really hard to parent alongside and like adult alongside because you were on meds that numbed you out. It made it harder for you to adult. And so
Yeah.
there was like a lot of frustration and resentment towards you, but then there was also like so much compassion and understanding of like you're not trying to create this situation for us. Also, again, 3 kids under the age of 3,
Yeah.
4 at that point, and me working 60 to 80 hours, and it was just like it was such a tough time.
Hmm.
But I still remember that one of the things that made you really look at your meds was, and I don't know that we've talked about this publicly, was your meds were on the counter. Remember? Your pill bottle was on the counter. And Jack was like, one of our twins was like 2.5. And Jack used to have this habit of sweeping. We called it sweeping, where he would be too short to see over something. So he would put his hand up on top of it and move his arm. So anything that was up there would just get swept off. And then he'd see what he found. And I remember you put your meds on the counter because, again, you were too tired. Like you just were moving around and weren't paying attention. It wasn't intentional at all. And Jack swept and he just happened to like do it just right that the bottle hit and the pills went everywhere. And I remember I came in the kitchen like 2 seconds later and like went, oh my gosh. And I like grabbed him up and we cleaned up all the meds, but like we had no idea because they went everywhere. We were like, yeah, there's a couple missing, but like they could be under the stove. Like they could be places. And and then we realized like a couple hours later that he had ingested at least one because he started like not being able to stay awake and ended up hospitalized for a couple days as he like detoxed that out. And I remember after that, you and I were like, okay, we got to look at this because you didn't like the meds and they were just like having negative impact in other places too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, that has been one thing that finding the right medicine really did help.
Yeah. You got on your ADHD meds and you got on your antidepressants and like you've been on those same meds for what, 5, 6 years now?
At least.
Yeah. And
A bit longer, yeah.
I really want to like end this around the last year and a half for you, maybe 2 years for you, right? Because like 4 or 5 years ago, I started really probably 5, 6 years, I started getting into personal development. I started doing a lot of like positive psychology and things. And then I ended up actually going the route of life and mindset coaching and then founding the Institute. I would love for you to share kind of your journey alongside that and like what your trauma healing has looked like
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when you first started doing this, it's so funny. I know I've literally heard some of your clients in different groups that I've been in and whatnot kind of say the same thing. It's like trauma. Like, I don't have any trauma. I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, my head stuff dealing with trauma was shell shock, PTSD from like war, from
Yeah.
serious conflict, that sort of thing. I mean, I just thought, no, no, no. I'm like, I'm good. I'm okay. And it's something just really realizing where a lot of how I felt and how I felt about myself, how I felt about other people really it's kind of come into focus, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been hugely healing. It's like realizing like that boundaries are good.
Yeah.
That they're not, it's not a wall. And if anything, it's one of the interesting things too has been in terms of family and stuff like that have also benefited where you've had, some finally like some changes. I'm not saying like big fights and this kind of thing, but people actually like expressing how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay to have emotions. I think sometimes too as like a man, it's like it's okay to have emotions as long as they're, anger, right, where they're supposed to be. But it's like realizing it's okay to have feelings, and that's a good thing to share those.
I love that you share your feelings with me now because before I used to be like, through my hypervigilance of having to learn how to read people's emotions really closely when I was younger, I would be like, you seem mad or you seem off or something's wrong. And you're like, no, I'm fine. Everything's great. Everything's okay. Everything's cool. Everything's fine. And then like 5 days later, you would like explode and be
Yeah.
super angry and frustrated. And I'm like, okay, I thought for the last 4 or 5 days you were pissed and I've been asking you and you've been telling me everything's fine. And obviously it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel like has helped you stop bottling it all up? What do you feel like has helped you feel your feelings and express your feelings and also worry less about if people see it, if they're going to like you or not?
I mean, I think one of the main ways too has been being able to express things, especially, even to you and to like other people, and just recognizing like it sounds silly because it sounds like something you should learn in elementary school. Like it's okay to be yourself, and it's okay to like what you like, to not like what you like, to have emotions, even if those emotions aren't good emotions, even if those emotions are a little bit more vulnerable. Even in some cases where it's like this idea that you're supposed to always have your guard up, armor, be tough, be strong, no cracks, no, nothing showing. And it's like just kind of coming to the realization that having emotions, being able to talk through things and figure things out and be able to actually express how you're feeling doesn't make you any less tough. If anything, it makes you smarter. That's what the rational thing is to do.
Mm-hmm.
Being tough or being manly, to the point where it's a hindrance to being who you are.
Like that's toxic masculinity.
Yeah. That's where the toxicity comes from. Where the idea of like it's not like it's okay to be a man. It's okay to be masculine. At least, it's like there's certain things, I mean, it's kind of how they are, it's like masculinity though doesn't mean that you don't have emotions,
Mm-hmm.
that you don't care about things, that you can't, it's like taking care of the kids, the amount of times that, it's kind of funny but also kind of sad how many times it's like people thinking of babysitting the kids or this or that, and it's like, no. I think I kind of got to the point where I'm like, you don't get to decide what makes me a good father, some random ass person or some made up person that I have in my head. Like, you don't get to decide what makes me a good man and a good husband. Like, that's something that I get to decide. Like, by proxy, you get to decide.
And I'm crying. I mean, just as your partner, it's so cool to see you come to that realization too. Cause like I've always really liked you. And sometimes it's been hard to like you when you don't like yourself or when you think that other people don't like you. Cause then
Yeah.
you act in ways that people don't like because you push them
Yeah.
away, which I also do.
That
Like I'm
used to
not,
be, yeah, that used to definitely be my go-to was, well, if you're not going to like me for something, then I'll do something and I'll push you away. And
yeah,
once you are gone, well, then you don't have to worry about finding out about X, Y, or Z, or
yeah.
I don't have to care whether or not you like that because you're not here.
Well, and I think the other thing that you and I had a really rough start to 2022. We were
Mm-hmm.
both processing a lot of our own stuff of what it meant to be, what it meant for me to be a woman, what it meant for you to be a man. Our oldest kiddo came out as non-binary. There were just a lot of other things going on. I was doing trauma healing. You were doing trauma healing. We were both in EMDR therapy. Like there was a bunch of things happening. And you I think we both had this moment where we were like, okay, you know what? If being ourselves with each other means that we lose each other's love, safety, and belonging, then then this isn't right. Like, this isn't the place we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be. And I feel like you and I both came to that realization, like, and it was it was so painful. And that's another episode for probably 2 years from now when we actually feel comfortable talking about it. We're not going to get into that tonight because it's already been an hour. But I think that that's really what I want to what I want to wrap this up around is like this year you've really done the work of like, who am I? What do I want? And you're still doing the work. You know, you still do have questions, but
Mm-hmm.
like, who am I? What do I want? How do I want to be? What does make me a father I'm proud of? What does make me a husband I'm proud of? What does make me a human that I'm proud of? Without like looking at anything external for
Yeah.
guidance. Like
Rules and guidance.
not
Yeah.
guidance. It's not I mean you get
No,
external
but in
guidance.
some ways, no, exactly. In some ways, but the idea that I would always feel like I would use another of somebody else's code, if you will, or
Yeah.
what somebody else thinks should be the way. And
Yeah.
it's not to say that I shouldn't think about things, about how I want to be, and really making sure I'm showing up. And again, not to say that I won't fall short, because again, it'd be really easy to just be like, I should be exactly how I am, and then just be that. Yeah, that'd be real easy. But it's also just not going through and like being like, oh, well, this person says this, so this is how I should think.
Yeah.
Or this is how I should just
Even me,
kind of blindly go with.
which was
Yeah, and in some ways, because it's also, let's be real, I think anybody listening probably also knows you're pretty freaking smart, Like, I mean, when you give advice, it's like one of those, yeah, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I should probably just take that. And again, it's not, an insult to you, but like,
but like also you for so long did things to try to make me happy and you tried to show up in ways to make me happy instead of being like what would make me happy that would also feel good for Lee and sometimes it doesn't matter if it feels good for Lee or not because
Mhm.
I need to put myself first. Like you putting yourself first is a brand new
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah, because my biggest thing is too is growing up, my thought was love is sacrifice. That you should sacrifice your needs or desires, and that was how you showed love.
I hate that word.
I know. But that was in my head, I thought, and it's interesting because I don't know what the term is for holding two thoughts in your head that are opposing, but
It's like
holding them at the
duality,
same time.
right? The dual it's the
Yeah,
both
I don't know.
it's
I think
we
there's a
call it
German
we
term
call
for it,
it the
but
both and, right? It's the
yeah,
both and.
yeah, yeah. I mean, just thinking completely separate thoughts on that, and that I need to sacrifice. No, but in terms of then also feeling like I want to be able to put myself first, at least sometimes. Like there's certain needs that I actually do have that sacrificing them isn't going to actually help. It's not showing love because in some ways it's the easier way to do things too. It's not the easiest to sometimes get what you need, be that, like I need to work out regularly. If I don't, I'm not going to feel as well. I'm not going to be able to show up as well. And it's like, yeah, is that time out of the day? Is that time out of like every week? In that sort of situation, it's like, yes, but it is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I could sacrifice all my workouts and just stay home and take care of the kids. And it's like, yeah, short term.
Go get your butt to the gym. And I feel like you've been doing a better job of asking, and I've been doing a better job of noticing when you're going back into sacrifice mode and being like, hey, no, like go do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Well,
it's been hard for me. You've had to talk me into actually going and doing some things that I enjoy doing.
Yeah, spending money on yourself is a big one.
Yeah.
It's fine. I already have a massive present picked out for you when I hit a certain goal with this business that you're going to literally be so excited about. And you're also going to be really mad that I spent that much money on you, and I don't care. So my question would be, is my last question for you, my love, is, for the men listening to this, or the humans listening to this that are partnered up with masculine men, or I should say masculine identifying men, what do you feel like is your biggest lesson through all of this? Like, what would you want other people to know?
That really being yourself, finding out who you are, and being able to be that person, if it's somebody who is all sorts of different, like levels of sexuality or monetary, they have that. If you are yourself, if you're true to who you are, that's okay. That doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, you will find people who like that person.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, meeting lots of people, meeting all sorts of different groups and individuals, like you realize there are people out there, no matter how off you think you are, or how weird, crazy, strange, like, you're not. You're be okay, and that there are people that will accept you for who you are, especially nowadays.
And sometimes those people are people that you already know, you just haven't given them a chance.
Yep. Yeah, you got to give people a chance, because that's the thing. You can have somebody who you're friends with or who you're in a relationship with say you're hiding yourself in big ways because you think you don't want to offend them or upset them, or that they'll think of you as not manly or not masculine, or they'll think of you as all these other things. And it's like, you got to give people credit. People that love you, especially people love you, you gotta be able to tell them who you are.
Yeah, there's a lot of inner work that goes into that, and also recognizing that if you show people who you are and they don't like it, go.
Yep.
Leave.
Yeah.
Because there are people out there that will like
it.
you. Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I just want to add one last thing. You opening up who you were and showing me more of who you were in all areas, like sexually, mentally, emotionally. I feel like you helped me learn so many things about myself that I didn't even know were options. Our relationship now feels absolutely incredible because you opened my eyes to things that I would have never thought about had you not shown me who you were and what you liked and how you wanted to show up in the world. And so, like, I know I gave our listeners zero details with that, and they're probably very interested as to what those things are. My private clients, some of them know what those things are. And, but like, just to close it, I think that I am so grateful that you were willing to do the work, that you were willing to show up and like learn about your past painful experiences and how they affected you and how they affected how you showed up in our marriage. And like, just to watch your mental health get better and better and better, and watch your confidence and watch your just like soul start to just shine through so much more, has been such a pleasure and a journey that I'm glad that I got to go on with you. So, and I'm really, really grateful.
Thanks so much, baby.
What'd you say?
So thank you, baby.
I'm really grateful that
love you.
I love you too. I'm really grateful that you came on here to talk to everyone too, because We need to have more conversations like this out in the real world. There's a reason why a lot of people are like, well, is it very trauma informed to talk about all these triggering topics like suicide and like sexual abuse that I've spoken about in my own history, or, sex in general, or like all money, all of these things? Yes, it is, because the more we don't talk about them publicly, the more shame gets wrapped up around
Agreed.
them. And so
I think there's nothing that you shouldn't be able to, in the right situation, and like,
yeah. And
people that are, there too. I mean, I'm not saying go up and, start going really into
like,
people, but
don't approach a stranger and start talking about these things.
Yeah, there shouldn't be anything that you can't talk about.
Yeah. And
there's something you feel like you can't discuss that is forbidden. It's like the Harry Potter Voldemort situation.
Yeah, don't say Voldemort.
It's like not speak his name. Don't say the name. It's like it does not. It only gives the problem more power to not be able to talk about it.
And so, like, if you're struggling with your mental health, we just want to say that we see you and hear you and witness you. And if you've, had hospitalizations, or somebody who's been hospitalized, or you've had a really tough time, or you've had to try a bunch of different meds, or you weren't able to work, or, it severely impacted your life, like, we get it. We get it.
And it may seem dark at some points, but I promise, guys, that being here, there is a light. Even the times when you can't see it, it's there.
Okay, now I'm crying again. All right, let's end with that. Thank you so much for joining me, babe.
Love you.
Love you too. All right, everyone. We will see you next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Invitation to head to our show notes to check out the offers and connections we mentioned. Or you can just head straight over to institutefortrauma.com and hop in our email list so that you never miss any of the cool things that we're doing over at the Institute. Invitation to be well and to take care of yourself this week, and we'll see you next time.